Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're heading to the Horn of Africa.
Right.
And I know what you're probably thinking. Usually when we pull up a map of this region, we're talking about, well, instability, civil war, famine, piracy, that whole narrative.
Which is fair, given the history. But, that narrative misses a huge part of the picture.
It really does. Today we're doing the opposite. We aren't looking at chaos. We're looking at control.
Yes.
Specifically, we're looking at two neighbors, Djibouti and Eritrea, who have somehow managed to completely freeze their political clocks. The world keeps spinning, but in these two countries, time has pretty much stopped.
It's a phenomenon called political stagnation.
Sure.
And what's so fascinating here is that we have this perfect A-B test. You've got two countries, side by side, same strategic coastline, but they've taken two radically different paths to the same place.
Which is entrenched authoritarianism.
Exactly.
And we're basing this conversation on a really comprehensive analysis. It's titled Djibouti and Eritrea, Stalled Paths to Democracy. The first thing that jumped out at me was just the sheer contrast in style.
It's a study in contrast.
Right.
If you want a quick way to think about it, Djibouti is the illusionist.
The illusionist, okay.
It's all about the performance of democracy. They have elections, a parliament, a constitution. It looks like a state.
Yeah.
But Eritrea is the fortress. They don't even pretend.
So they didn't just rig the game, they burned the casino down.
That is a terrifyingly accurate metaphor, actually.
Yes. So let's start with the illusionists. Let's talk Djibouti. For anyone who hasn't looked at a shipping map lately, why does this tiny little country matter so much?
Real estate. Pure and simple. Djibouti sits right on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
The choke point.
The choke point between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Something like, 10% of the world's oil and 20% of all commercial exports pass right by their front door.
So if you control that coast, you basically have a hand on the faucet of the global economy.
Precisely. And the government of Djibouti knows this. They've built what political scientists call a rentier state. They don't rely on taxing their own citizens for money. They rely on rents from foreign powers.
And this is where it gets just wild. You have the United States' only permanent African base, Camp Lemonnier, sitting just a few miles away from China's first ever overseas naval base. And then you've got the French, the Japanese, the Italians. It's like a game of risk.
It is. And all that cash flow, it gives the regime a lot of insulation. They don't really need their people's approval because they've got the world's superpowers paying the bills.
Okay, so enter President Ismail Omar Guelleh. He's been the landlord of this prime real estate since 1999.
And he took over from his uncle, by the way, so it's a dynastic succession.
Right. But here's the thing. Djibouti has elections. They have opposition parties. So why do we call this authoritarian consolidation and not just, a flawed democracy?
Because the game is rigged before the players even get to the field. Look, the turning point was really 2010. Guelleh was coming up on his term limit. The Constitution said 2 terms, and that's it.
A standard democratic guardrail.
Right, a standard guardrail. But Guelleh didn't want to leave. So what does he do? He doesn't suspend the Constitution. No, he uses his party's dominance in Parliament to just amend it. He shortens the presidential term from 6 years to 5, but, and here's the trick, he completely removes the limit on the number of terms.
I'll stay for shorter chunks of time, but I'll stay forever.
Exactly. And this triggered a massive backlash. You remember the Arab Spring in 2011?
Vaguely in this region, yeah. I mostly remember Egypt, Tunisia.
Well, it hit Djibouti, too. People saw Guelleh entrenching himself, and they hit the streets. Thousands of people, which for a country that small is huge.
Wow.
But the regime's response was very instructive. They didn't just let it play out. They cracked down hard, tear gas, arrests, banning demonstrations.
So they use the veneer of law to change the rules, and then they use force when people complain about the new rules.
Precisely. And then look at the 2013 legislative elections. This is where the illusion part really comes into play. The opposition actually got it together. They formed a coalition called the Union for National Salvation, the USN.
Okay.
They campaigned. And according to the official count, the ruling party won. Conveniently. About 80% of the seats.
Which implies the opposition did win some seats.
They did. But they claimed widespread fraud. They argued they actually won the majority. And when they protested the results, the government stripped the opposition MPs of their immunity and started harassing them.
So the lesson is, even if you play our game, you can't win.
You can't win. It feels like gaslighting on a national scale.
Yeah.
You have the structures, a parliament, courts, but they've been completely hollowed out.
That's the definition of consolidation, then. It's not about abolishing institutions.
No, it's about capturing them. The judiciary in Djibouti isn't independent. It's an arm of the executive. The media isn't a watchdog. It's a mouthpiece for the state.
I want to push on this for a second. If you're just an average citizen in Djibouti, does this stability actually feel oppressive? Or is it just boring?
That's the real question, isn't it? It feels oppressive because the cost of living is skyrocketing, unemployment is massive, and yet everyone knows the government is collecting millions in rent from these foreign bases.
And the money isn't trickling down.
Not at all. But you can't complain about it, or you risk getting arrested. It's a pressure cooker with the lid welded shut.
Okay, so that's the smart authoritarianism of Djibouti. Keep the forms, but control the function. Now let's go north. Let's cross the border to Eritrea.
A completely different world.
If Djibouti is gaslighting, Eritrea feels like a total blackout. The source material calls it a totalitarian state. We throw that word around a lot, but what does it actually mean here?
It means the state tries to control every single aspect of public and private life. In Djibouti, you can probably have a private conversation in a cafe. In Eritrea, you have to wonder if the person you're talking to is an informant.
And the man at the top is Isaias Afwerki.
Since 1993. The independence hero who just never took off the uniform.
You said earlier they don't even pretend to have elections. Is that literal?
It is absolutely literal. There have been 0 national elections since independence. None. There is no functioning parliament. The Constitution that was ratified back in 1997.
Yeah.
It has never been implemented. It's just a piece of paper in a drawer somewhere.
So how does the country even function? I mean, who passes laws?
Rulings come by decree. The country is run by the PFDJ, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice. It is the only legal party. If you try to form another one, you go to jail. It's as simple as that.
But how do you control a population for 30 years without giving them anything? No vote, no voice. Why hasn't it just collapsed?
2 words. National service.
Okay, unpack this. Because when I hear national service, I'm thinking, maybe a gap year or the draft, like in South Korea.
This is different. In Eritrea, national service is effectively indefinite conscription. It starts around age 18. You go to the Sawa military camp, which is notorious for abuse. And after training, you're assigned a job. Maybe it's in the military, maybe construction, maybe teaching.
And you get paid for this?
A pittance. It's essentially forced labor. And here's the kicker. You don't get to leave until the government says you can. There are people in their 40s and 50s still serving.
Wait, so the government decides your career, your location, and your salary indefinitely?
Correct. It is a mechanism of total control. You can't organize a protest if you're deployed to some remote border post. You can't build a civil society if your entire youth is owned by the state.
That's incredibly bleak. It also explains why Eritrea has one of the highest refugee outflows in the world, even when it's not in an active civil war.
Exactly. People aren't fleeing a conflict. They're fleeing the service. They are fleeing the complete lack of a future.
There's another detail in the research that just blew my mind. The diaspora tax. So even if you manage to escape, you aren't really free.
This is one of the most unique and insidious parts of the Eritrean system. The regime collects a 2% income tax from Eritreans living abroad.
No matter where they are.
Doesn't matter. If you live in London or Toronto or Dubai and you want to send money back to your family or you need a passport renewed, you have to pay the tax.
It's transnational repression. You can leave the physical borders, but the state still has its hand in your pocket.
And it funds the very system you ran away from. It's brilliant in a very dark way. It ensures the regime stays funded even as it hollows out its own economy.
So we have these 2 neighbors, Djibouti, the savvy businessman who rigs a contract, Eritrea, the warden who just locks the door. But when you zoom out, they seem to share a lot of the same DNA.
They do. The mechanisms are different, but the pillars of their survival are the same. The research identifies 3 key shared obstacles to democracy here.
Okay, let's run through them. First is the forever leader.
The personalization of power. In both countries, the institutions are weak, but the man at the top is incredibly strong. Geopolitical and Afwerki have made themselves synonymous with the state itself.
You can't imagine the country without them.
You can't. Which, by the way, creates a massive succession crisis just waiting to happen. But for now, it keeps them secure. The second pattern is the silencing of dissent.
Right.
In Djibouti, it's legal harassment, co-optation. In Eritrea, it's just the gulag. But the result is the same, silence.
And the third?
Information control. I mean, Eritrea is often called the North Korea of Africa for a reason. It has no private media at all. Djibouti is slightly more open, but self-censorship is rampant because journalists know where the red lines are.
Okay, I want to pivot to the elephant in the room, Or maybe the elephant in the Red Sea.
Geopolitics.
Exactly. We established this region is critical for global trade, for security. We have Western democracies, the US, France, who preach human rights. They issue reports condemning these regimes. And yet, the checks for the base leases in Djibouti clear every single month.
This is the uncomfortable truth of international relations, isn't it? We're looking at the stability trap.
Okay, play devil's advocate for the West here. Why not pressure Guella? Why not say, hey, hold a fair election or we're moving our base?
Because where would they move it to? Somalia? Yemen? Sudan? The entire neighborhood is on fire. Djibouti offers a safe, air-conditioned platform to launch drones and patrol shipping lanes.
So the strategic value outweighs the democratic deficit.
It absolutely does in the eyes of Washington, Paris, and for that matter, Beijing. Gilead knows he's untouchable. He knows that as long as he keeps the port open and the terrorists out, he can do whatever he wants to his own people.
And what about Eritrea? They don't have the big U.S. base. Why are they allowed to operate a forced labor state in the 21st century?
Because Eritrea is a spoiler. They are tough, they are militarized, and they're willing to intervene in regional conflicts like we saw in Ethiopia's Tigray War. The international community tends to treat Eritrea with containment, not engagement.
So they're sanctioned.
They are sanctioned, yes, but Afwerki thrives on isolation. He uses those sanctions to tell his people, see, the world is against us. This is why we need to be a fortress. International pressure actually reinforces his narrative.
It feeds the siege mentality that justifies the whole system.
Exactly.
This is a really cynical takeaway, but it feels like the very location of these countries is a curse for their citizens. Because they're on the Red Sea, they're just pawns in a bigger game.
I think that's a very strong argument. We usually talk about the resource curse in terms of oil or diamonds. Here, the resource is location. And it attracts foreign support for regimes that otherwise might have crumbled.
So what's the final verdict from the source text? Is there any light at the end of this tunnel?
The outlook is, well, it's sobering. The text concludes that what we're seeing is entrenched authoritarianism. The drift isn't toward democracy, it's away from it.
And the lesson for us watching this?
The lesson is that stability is not a synonym for democracy. We look at Djibouti and say, oh, it's peaceful. But that peace is bought with repression. We look at Eritrea and say it's stable. But it's the stability of a graveyard.
It's the stability of a graveyard. Wow. That sticks with you.
It should. It reminds us that just because a country isn't in the headlines for a civil war, it doesn't mean its people are free.
Before we wrap, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked about how the U.S. and other powers are, well, complicit here because of their strategic interests.
Right.
So as you watch the news about the Red Sea, about Houthi attacks or shipping delays, I want you to think about the other side of that coin. We pay a premium for the safety of those ships, but the people paying the real price are the citizens of Djibouti and Eritrea, whose freedom is essentially bartered away for our shipping lanes.
It really forces us to ask, is the global economy worth the disenfranchisement of millions of people? And if the answer is no, what are we actually prepared to do about it?
Because right now, the answer from the international community seems to be a resounding, yes, it is worth it.
Sad, but true.
On that uplifting note, thank you for joining us on the deep dive. It's complex, it's heavy, but it's so important to know how the world really works.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.